an important part of our
National Educational Television presents At Issue, a commentary on events and people in the news. This week, At Issue looks at the work of United States Ambassador Lincoln Gordon in the midst of a Brazilian political crisis. Brasilia, capital of Brazil, built during the regime of former President Juscelino Kubitschek. This month, the new government stripped Kubitschek of his political rights. The charges? Corruption and toleration of communists. This action raises questions and doubts in Brasilia and in Washington. Can the charges against Kubitschek be proved? Or is the new military-backed regime afraid he will return to power? Will the new government continue to press for the economic and social changes needed in Brazil? The United States Embassy, Rio de Janeiro, April 21st. It is 3 weeks since President João Goulart was ousted by a military coup. Ambassador Gordon and the American government welcome the change. They look forward to better relations with the new regime. The embassy expects support for American foreign policy, private investment, and the Alliance for Progress. This is headquarters for 1,200 Americans on government service throughout Brazil. Their objective is to keep the most important nation in Latin America firmly committed to the West. Goulart was tugging in another direction. He is now out of the way in exile in Uruguay. Lincoln Gordon has been in charge since 1961. He is a professor of economics at Harvard and an architect of the Alliance for Progress. He has been on government assignments for 16 of the past 28 years. In the crisis days of the military coup, he was in immediate contact with Secretary of State Rusk, nearly 5,000 miles away in Washington. By contrast, communications within Brazil are poor. Messages may take hours to get through, sometimes days. So the ambassador holds frequent staff meetings, calling in his key men from around the country.
Well, tell us a word about how things look from Brasilia now. I got the government's really going to be there.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ambassador. I think we have a new day dawning in Brasilia.
Robert Dean, counselor of the embassy staff in Brasilia. 22 years in the Foreign Service, a specialist in Latin American affairs.
Castelo Branco has indicated his desire to govern from Brasilia. Most of our ministers are expected to be up there during his tenure, and I expect that we'll see more of our ambassador up there, too, during this period. Although Brasilia has, in the 8 months I've been there, I've noticed an Alice in Wonderland aspect to the town. It's pretty hard to believe that this great city exists located on the central Brazilian plateau. But we feel we've been in touch with the country through Congress, representatives from all of the states and the territories of Brazil.
I think the revolutionary high command, Mr. Ambassador, ceased to exist at the very moment that Castelo Branco was inaugurated.
Colonel Vernon Walters, military attaché. Ambassador Gordon worked hard to have him transferred from Rome. He is an intimate friend of the new president, Humberto Castelo Branco. They were comrades in World War II, when a Brazilian brigade fought with the Allied army in Italy. Colonel Walters was one of the president's first dinner guests after his inauguration.
The deep desire of the Army is to get back to normal representative constitutional democracy in Brazil. The Army, in fact, really moved only after they became convinced that they would not reach the 1965 elections safely without the establishment of some sort of totalitarian government in Brazil, which I think the inauguration of President Castelo Branco in civilian clothes was significant of his desire to emphasize the civilian character of his government. I believe this is fully supported by the Army, which has great confidence in him, as I think very broad sectors of Brazilian opinion do.
Rio de Janeiro, city of delights. By day there is no water, at night there are no lights. The Brazilian rhyme is self-mocking. The route from the embassy to the residence shows Brazil's delights, the benefits of industrialization for a growing middle class. But there are failures. A luxury liner loaded with political prisoners. And the famous favelas, slums full of poverty-stricken peasants who flee the underplanted or underpaid farms of the north. Life expectancy in Brazil is about 40 years for men, 45 for women. In the Northeast, it is about 30. 50% of the population is illiterate and legally disenfranchised. Ambassador Gordon has a Peace Corps team in the favelas, trying to bring the benefits of medicine and sanitation to a breeding ground of disease and revolution. Brazil has a population of 80 million people. 10 million live in the 200-mile strip between Rio and Sao Paulo. Private American investment totals nearly $1.5 billion, and the Alliance for Progress has spent $500 million since 1961. But last year, the Brazilian birth rate overtook the rate of industrial growth. The ambassador's residence. Tomorrow morning, he and his wife Allison leave on their first diplomatic trip since the government changeover. Today, unofficial relaxation with some friends. The residence is also used for work and diplomatic entertainment, which costs the embassy about $20,000 a year. Ambassador Gordon's salary is $27,500. He reflects on the financial problems of diplomacy.
One of the conditions that I made when President Kennedy and Secretary Rusk first asked me to take this job was that at least I shouldn't lose money. They had already worked out with some of the ambassadors in Europe at that time, early in 1961, arrangements to make sure that the costs of maintaining the house, which are very large, would be fully covered by the government, so that the representation allowance would be used not on house maintenance as such, but on representation as it should be. That is to say, entertaining at dinners, lunches, receptions, people, the entertainment of whom would help the interests of the United States.
Brazilian artists are in that category. These paintings are part of the Gordons' personal collection. A transport of the United States Air Force mission. Destination, Porto Alegre, capital of Rio Grande do Sul, southernmost state in Brazil. 3 weeks ago, Goulart flew this same route in a futile attempt to raise an army and start a counterattack. "30 minutes before the ambassador's arrival, the honor guard of the state militia assembles. Though Porto Alegre was once strong Goulart territory, the governor has assured Ambassador Gordon he will be warmly received. Rio Grande do Sul is bordered by Uruguay, Argentina, and the Atlantic Ocean. It is the 17th of Brazil's 22 states to be visited by the ambassador. 400 Americans live here. 200 businessmen in the capital, 200 missionaries scattered throughout the ranch country to the west, where the embassy group will soon visit. The welcome party is composed of Brazilians, consulate staff, and American residents. They are led by Consul Thomas Duffield. His 18 years in the Foreign Service include Frankfurt, Saigon, Madrid, and Rotterdam, where he met his wife. A preview of welcomes to come on the trip, with a schedule blocked out in intervals as tight as 10 minutes. Gordon's reception is warm, as the governor promised. But some members of his staff are concerned. First, over the possibility of unrest and demonstrations by Goulart's remaining supporters in Porto Alegre. Second, because this official visit, so soon after the military coup, might seem like a pat on the back from Uncle Sam for a job well done by the governor and military command in squelching Goulart. And that might be interpreted as close American involvement in Brazilian political affairs. Porto Alegre is an industrial capital of 700,000 in an agricultural state of 5 million. Many are descended from Germans and Italians who came to Brazil in the second half of the 19th century. The governor's family name, for example, is Meneghetti. No matter where he goes, Ambassador Gordon is never far from Brazilian politics. Campaigns begin with a paintbrush. Leonel Brizola, Goulart's brother-in-law, was the last governor of the state. During the ambassador's visit, he is being tracked down by army and police. He will escape to Uruguay later in the month. Mayor Sereno Chez is a Goulart man. It's not certain whether he'll receive the ambassador. The jails are filled with political prisoners. Goulart sympathizers, those leaning too actively to the left, or old political enemies of new men in power. The militia trains to fight guerrilla bands reportedly organized by Brizola in the countryside. First order of business after a courtesy call at the governor's palace is for Ambassador Gordon to meet the press of Porto Alegre.
Nosso país e os Estados Unidos, e principalmente se realmente, como se diz, aumentarão as inserções, principalmente de capitais e a ajuda econômica do seu país.
O fato é que nós mantivemos relações.
The ambassador's fluent Portuguese is valuable in his personal, diplomatic, and press relations, even with his Yankee accent.
Quando o presidente Kennedy
The major subject is the Alliance for Progress, and there are no hostile questions. Ambassador Gordon occasionally tends to lecture, not just answer a question, especially on economic matters. This brings distress to some members of his staff, but Brazilians are great talkers and seem to appreciate another.
e do Congresso, que é o mais importante, o Congresso nosso, porque o Congresso controla as verbas. He's to be called.
Lincoln Gordon scores with the press. The ambassador's arrival makes American policy front-page news.
Instabilidade política da qual
3 weeks ago, these palace guards manned machine guns against an attack that never came. Tonight, they guard Governor Meneghetti's official reception. When Goulart came through Porto Alegre, the governor denounced him and retreated to a politically conservative and militarily safe part of the state. By Brazilian custom, men and women are entertained separately at formal occasions. Mrs. Gordon sometimes plans embassy dinners this way when her husband must conduct business at the table. But men and women eat the same food. Rio Grande do Sul has 12 million sheep and 10 million head of cattle. At least one of each usually shows up at every state dinner. But tonight's meal has a surprise: roast Brazilian turkey. Brazilians are exceptionally cordial. On a trip such as this, Ambassador Gordon knows they are also looking for favors. Governor Meneghetti wants aid for roads and electrification. When Brizola was governor, he turned down aid and expropriated the telephone and electric companies. They were American subsidiaries. In the square directly below the American consulate, Goulart set up recruiting tables to enlist volunteers. Some signed, but none fought.